Pardon me. Well, it's hard to follow an act like Cronkite. There's been so much about him the last week. I don't know what else there is to say about him. I would like to point out a couple of things. He had this reputation for being cool and calm and collected, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the occasion. But that doesn't do him any justice. He was really ferocious at times, and I'm reminded of in the 1968 Democratic National Convention, when some security agents roughed up Dan Rather on the floor. Walter lost his cool on the air, shouted about thuggery on the floor of the convention, felt embarrassed and ashamed that he had lost his cool that way, but there it was. Next day, in the anchor booth, to our shock, in burst Mayor Daley, madder than could be about what had happened the night before, kicked me out of my seat, sat down, and Walter interviewed him about the events of the night before. From Walter's point of view, it was one of the low points in his life because he felt he wasn't forceful enough with Mayor Daley and hadn't defended the troops and the media and the rules of coverage. Then in the fall of 1969, Spiro Agnew, then vice president, delivered his famous attack on the media, the nattering nabobs of negativity, he called reporters, and part of an Eastern establishment elite who were neither elected nor selected and we found out that was the initial attack on the media by the Nixon people. And Walter was furious about that on the grounds that if the media was not going to defend itself, who would? He grabbed Don Hewitt at the time, and the two of them flew out to St. Joseph, Missouri, Walter's birthplace, and had a town meeting with citizens of St. Joseph, letting these citizens explore the whole idea of whether we were nattering nabobs of negativity or not. And it caused quite a stir. CBS broadcast that town meeting that night, and it was the event that kind of signaled CBS News out as a target by the Nixon White House. But I don't want to get bogged down in all that serious stuff. There were other aspects of Walter that would drive anybody crazy. He had this bizarre idea once that he would ad-lib the newscast, and without a script, that he would just read in all day long and then get up there and recite the stories that we thought were important enough to report. Needless to say, the director especially was crazed at this idea. There were so many contact points. An evening newscast is the most structured event on television or any sort of media. Well, we tried it, and Walter insisted that when it came time to roll a piece of film, he would brush his nose, and that would be the cue to the I kid you not, this really happened. And that would be the cue to the director to roll the projector. And now we're talking about film, not videotape, and in those days it took 7 seconds for the projector to get up to broadcast speed. So you had to be really, really tense and tender about this, and we never made it, okay? It was utter chaos. Either Walter ran over the film or the film just didn't come up, and nobody knew what was going on, especially any sort of other. It lasted for 2 days, and we went back to conventional script. Now, then there was a time he forgot his name. Signing off, said, "This is," and it was a blank. And it blank. I'm sorry, blank. Finally, the control room rescued him by taking it away and going somewhere else. We never did figure out, he never figured out what had happened, okay? He also had a horrible problem with the second month of the year. He could never pronounce it right, and we'd get all sorts of complaints. This is before blogs and the internet, from viewers either by telephone or mail about his pronunciation of the second month of the year. It got to the point where we would rehearse him for about the last week in January about how you said it. And it worked for a day or two, and then there was a relapse, and we went back to it was just terrible. The other thing I want to talk about is something called the magic number. If you were anywhere around our newsroom at the time, you'd hear people shouting in the last half hour, certainly, about something called the magic number. It was a piece of sorcery that was invented. I can't claim credit for it. Because Walter, who was very diligent, very precise, he thought, about timing things. It had to do with Walter's time on the air in a half-hour, well, actually a 22-minute newscast. And he would time each piece of his copy down to the precise second, except on air, it never matched. And of course, it drove everybody crazy. So what happened is somebody with a more mathematical mind than I have calculated how much slippage there was. And so we would tell Walter, we'd give Walter a number that was less than what it actually was. And he would stick to that number, and of course on air he would expand to what we call the magic number. And so we cheated him every day. And whether he knew this or not, I don't know. We never had the guts to talk to him about it because we didn't want to open up that whole can of worms. So, but we lived with that for years. But you know, he was a lot of fun off camera. You've heard this elsewhere. I mean, he played the clarinet badly, good enough to get on his high school band. And then in recent years, of course, his pal Mickey Hart of the Grateful Dead brought him a set of drums, which just absolutely enthralled him. And several weeks before the end, Jimmy Buffett flew his seaplane, landed on the East River, right next to Walter's riverside apartment, came upstairs, and as Kate told me, opened up this beautiful ukulele case, took out an instrument she just thought was the most beautiful thing in the world, and serenaded Walter with a little ukulele recital. He was always a wire service reporter in his heart, and he always lived by the wire service adage, which I don't think anybody has anything to do with it. Get it first, but get it right. And one of his first jobs, about getting it right, one of his first jobs was at the Houston Press, where he was a copy boy, I guess, a cub reporter. He had to get the Houston Bank clearing number every day, and it was published on, believe it or not, on the front page of the Houston Press in a little box. And it was a multi-million-dollar number. And one day he got the cents wrong. He put down 27 cents when it should have been 17 cents at the end of a $3 million thing. Well, he got called up and really beaten up by the editor. And the way he described it, he went out afterwards feeling hangdog about it, and all of his senior buddies at the nearby bar would say to him, "Hey, you better get out of town, or, you know, you better be careful." He discovered that little number was the key to the gambling numbers game in Houston. And the last 5 digits of the clearing number was the winning number. And here he put down 27 cents instead of 17 cents, and his life was in danger. But he always used that as an example of the importance of accuracy in most terrific details. When at one contract negotiation, and then I'll end. At one contract negotiation, he shocked the people, it's the suits at CBS, so to speak, by saying he didn't want a raise, but he wanted 3 months off. Okay, he wanted a new contract that paid him the same, but for 9 months of work. Well, they were just jolted, to say the least, because of a fear of evaporating ratings if he was gone for 3 months. And the editor at the time, dearly departed, beloved John Merriman, came up with what seemed like a reasonable solution. He said Walter should name his boat assignment. And so every night during the 3-month hiatus, we would say, "Walter is on assignment." Walter never thought that was funny. Okay. And The last thing I'd say is, on the day he left CBS News and became a CBS special correspondent, which moved him out of the news area, he accepted an invitation to something called Bohemian Grove, which was a camp in Northern California for grown-up men, establishment men, bankers, politicians, serious scholars who went, and it was an off-the-record situation, and they acted like teenage boys, peeing on trees and all that sort of stuff. And Walter left the Evening News in March of 1981, and my God, the following week he announced he was going to Bohemian Grove that summer. We discovered he'd been invited for years previous, but felt it was not acceptable, given his role in the news, to go. But once he felt free of the news, he was out there and went there every year. And of course, we don't know what happened, but acted like a teenager. He became a member of the CBS board, of course, and was on there for some years. And he once said to me, "Boy, you don't know how many ways there are to say earnings per share. We sit there for hours and we discuss earnings per share." It's just remarkable to me. And every time I bring up a question about television, nobody wants to talk to me about it. And there we are. And that's a little bit of the Walter I know.